Brothers and sisters, as we have long seen so many wars, especially the war in Ukraine and in Russia, now this imminent threat and well, at war in Israel and Palestine, and also so many other places in the world that maybe will not make the news because, it may not be the immediate concerns of our Western media, or, there's so many people living in despair, in turmoil. And yet the power of our prayer is very real. We're human beings. We are spirits as well as we are incarnate spirits. We have bodies. So we should never neglect either side. The physical things we could do, the food support, the actual giving of our physical time, or whatever ways that challenges and situations present themselves to us. But also that we should not fall for the illusion that our prayer is not efficacious, or our prayer cannot reach these people. It's a good time for us to rebolster our confidence in our prayer, and also in whatever ways that the Lord may open to us that we could contribute in more tangible forms. I shouldn't say more tangible forms, because prayer is tangible. Prayer is real and efficacious and produces and supplies needs for people. So we must always do both. And I guess the point of this little video is for us to keep our hope high and bright. And we may take out of a story I'm going to share now some kind of lesson for our own lives, for a lesson of hope. And the story I want to share is about a Russian philosopher in the 20th century. His name was Alexander Ogorodnikov. And Alexander was a great philosophical intellectual who had read the gamuts of 20th century philosophies that made his brain addled and contrary to God, and he got lost in his own ideas and thoughts. And he also had a secret kind of passion, a nighttime habit, where him and a couple of friends would break into apartments and steal things, and they made actually quite a lucrative business. But eventually he would be stirred and converted to the faith, along with another famous Russian intellectual, Tatiana, I believe her last name is Gorbacheva. And together they had a great ministry. They founded a soup kitchen in Russia, and he also had kind of like a seminary, quote unquote, for intellectuals, where they would speak about faith and evangelize. Because of this, and during the communist times, he was arrested many times. And I think about 7 times he was arrested for his obstinacy in spreading the gospel. And eventually, on the 7th time, they basically gave him an alternative: either go to exile or to prison. And so he, refusing to be thrown out of his own native land and go into exile, he chose prison. And they were so cruel that they placed him naked into solitude in a room, and the room was actually absolutely freezing. There was ice on the walls, and he was naked. You could imagine the psychological trauma, the torment. Eventually, he was able to get a letter to his mother and asked her to smuggle this letter to kind of news. And eventually, that letter had gotten out into the French newspapers and the other European papers, and so it kind of gathered a lot of attention and put a lot of pressure. So there was a man named Pascal Maillard. He's the brother of Sister Emmanuel Maillard, who some of you know is such a great advocate of Medjugorje, and such a great pilgrim for Our Lady on this earth, and spreading, renewing our hope in the power of prayer, the power of the promises of the Lord. And no matter our tumultuous situations and our moments of despair and lack of hope. And she gives a story about her brother. Her brother Pascal is with his fiancée in Paris, reads this letter about Alexander, this Russian intellectual in prison, and himself and his wife and his fiancée decide to offer up many sacrifices and prayers for him, and invoke their guardian angels just to bring these prayers to this man in prison. And so eventually, because of the international pressure and stuff, this man is freed, he's released. And it was in 86 that he was freed. And in 1987, he ends up on pilgrimage organized by a sister in Russia, Sister Tamara, who wanted to to introduce the little Therese, the little flower, to the Russian people. And so she organized this pilgrimage to Lisieux. And so Alexander was on pilgrimage there, and it just so happened that that pilgrimage ended up being led by Pascal, this man who had now been married and had prayed for him and offered up his sacrifices and offerings to him. And in this conversation, when he was sitting down, he realized that this was Alexander, who he was praying for all his time. And in that conversation, Alexander revealed to him that he had actually had many mystical experiences while in the cell. And one day he experienced angels who came and surrounded him, and felt warmth from them that protected him from the cold. And he knew that they were angels sent from Westerners and Christians in the West. And so there's a powerful story about how our prayer and to invoke our guardian angels, to bring our prayer to help people in the most desperate situations.